With the United States' involvement in World War II on the horizon, the government desperately needed to replace its aging fleet of military vehicles. On July 11, 1940, the Department of War sent specifications for a small, lightweight, 3-seat, 4-wheel drive vehicle to no less than 135 U.S. manufacturers. This request was so urgent that companies were given just 11 days to respond with a bid, 49 days to have a prototype ready, and 75 days in which to produce an initial run of 70 vehicles. Of the 135, just 2 submitted proposals, American Bantam and Willys Overland. Carl Probst, an American freelance engineer and automotive pioneer, started work on his design for Bantam on July 17, 1940, and finished 2 days later. By the 22nd, the entire proposal including cost estimates was handed in to Uncle Sam. Bantam won the initial contract and the prototype, the Blitz buggy, was delivered to a U.S. Army camp in Baltimore within the 75 days requirement. The Army knew that Bantam did not have the production capacity to meet the Army's needs, nor did they have the money behind them to accomplish such a feat, so the Army invited Willys and Ford to create prototypes and sent them the Blitz buggy's blueprints. In just a few weeks, both companies had test vehicles available. The Willys Pilot, known as the Quad, was delivered on November 13, 1940, followed 10 days later by the Ford Pygmy. Since both were based upon Bantam's design, it is hardly surprising that they looked almost exactly like the Bantam Pilot. One obvious exception was the flat grille used by Ford. In the end, the government awarded contracts to all 3 companies. Each vehicle received a new name. The Willys Quad was renamed the MA Military Model A. The Ford was given the name GP, the G standing for government and the P denoting the vehicle's wheelbase of 80 inches. Bantam also revised and improved its model, which became the BRC-40. The Army required manufacturers to produce vehicles with fully interchangeable parts. Not wanting to have Ford parts end up on Willys vehicles without getting the credit, Ford stamped every one of their parts, right down to individual nuts and bolts, with a script letter F. The prototype vehicles from each manufacturer was put through a rigorous test program. Knowing a Bantam from an Willys or a Ford World War II Jeep can be intimidating. One of the easiest keys to quick identification is a Jeep's grille. Throughout the war, 363,000 Willys Jeeps and 280,000 Ford GPWs were built. Bantam was also commissioned to build their nimble little BRC-40s, and they made 2,605. With most being sent to British and Commonwealth military forces such as those of Australia and New Zealand. In total, there were over 640,000 Jeeps built during World War II. The origin of the name Jeep is unclear. The most popular theory is that when the first pre-series vehicles arrived, soldiers may have started to use the nickname in reference to Eugene the Jeep, Popeye's lightning-fast and resourceful pet companion, from the popular comic strip. Later, Willys Overland organized a press demonstration. The test driver, Irving Red Houseman, hearing soldiers repeatedly giving the vehicle this nickname, also used it when interviewed by the Washington Daily News. It spread like a bonfire. Ford also built 13,000 amphibious Jeeps with the designation GPA, GP Amphibious, nicknamed SEEP for Sea Jeep. Inspired by the larger GMC DUKW, the SEEP proved to be too heavy, too unwieldy, and with insufficient freeboard. Despite participating successfully in the September 1943 Sicily landings, most GPAs were routed to Russia under the Lend-Lease program. The Russians were sufficiently pleased with its ability to cross rivers that Russia developed their version after the war, the GAZ-46. On October 13, 1942, a Willys MB, nicknamed Old Faithful, received 2 shrapnel holes in its windshield while shelled by a Japanese battleship on Guadalcanal. The Marines that she belonged to awarded her the Purple Heart for wounds received on Lunga Beach. The Jeep survived 2 beach landings. It was the first to land on Guadalcanal, and during the Bougainville invasion. The Jeep was retired after 18 months on December 22, 1943, having traveled more than 11,000 miles of jungle terrain in Bougainville as a command car for 4 different Marine generals. It was the first American vehicle ever decorated with a Purple Heart, and spent the rest of the war on display during bond tours. When the Japanese Imperial Army invaded the Philippines, they discovered a Bantam BRC-60 Mark II reconnaissance car. They were so impressed with the design that they sent it to Japan so that Toyota could reverse engineer it. After the war, Toyota even used Jeep in its advertising, until a less than friendly call from attorneys convinced it to change to Land Cruiser. Over in Britain at luxury carmaker Rover, the chief engineer, Maurice Wilkes, was at work on Britain's 4-wheel drive Jeep. Maurice based his new Land Rover on the Jeep design. He built his prototype on a war surplus Jeep chassis, and by 1948 Rover showed their car at the Amsterdam Motor Show, and orders for the Land Rover came in faster than the factory could make them. The British Jeep legend had just been born. Various attachments could be installed on the MB, with arms mounted at the rear, the most well-known. However, one of the more interesting and incredible conversions made the MB a small railcar. The MB could then haul up to 10 tons of supplies up and down the railways and easily be reset into a land vehicle. With the war won, tens of thousands of Jeeps, the very vehicles that had served on the front lines and helped secure victory, were suddenly superfluous. Some were repurposed to serve at military bases in the Cold War with the Soviet Union, but many more were simply no longer needed. The result was the establishment of several Jeep graveyards where decommissioned vehicles were left outdoors, to surrender slowly to time and the elements. In the Philippines, hundreds of surplus Jeeps were sold or given to the Filipinos. An American soldier, named Harry Stonehill, was involved in the disposal of military surplus, and reportedly created a black market. The Jeeps were stripped down and altered locally, metal roofs were added, and the vehicles decorated in vibrant colors with chrome-plated ornaments on the sides and hood. The back was reconfigured with 2 long parallel benches with passengers facing each other to accommodate more passengers. The size, length and passenger capacity has increased as it evolved through the years. Modern Jeepneys are now produced with engines and other parts from Japan or South Korea.